The month of June is utterly Geminian. And not just because we have this new moon in this sign, but it's also joined by Venus and Jupiter, the two benefics in astrology, also in Gemini. And last but certainly not least, we have Mercury in Gemini. And Mercury rules this sign. Whenever you have a planet in its own sign, it is super strong. So much Gemini energy. It's a beautiful sign. It's fun, it's curious, it's exploratory, tends to be lighthearted. If we look at Gemini in a vacuum, of course, every front has a back. There's a way we can get it wrong. We'll talk about that too. But it's not all light and fluffy. The fly in the ointment here is that we also have Mars, the war god, in a square to Pluto, the god of hell, which is a much more intense set of energies. So we have the more light Gemini, the more intense Mars, Pluto square. How can these come together integratively? That's what we'll explore here today. Thanks for joining my video. Please click the like and subscribe button. You know how that goes. It helps me with the algorithm. And with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into the chart. Okay, as you can see, we got these 5 planets in Gemini. They're square to Saturn and Pisces. That'll be interesting. But then we also have this juicy Mars square Pluto, which is going to be happening through most of June. And intensity is the uncontested key word with those 2 planets. But let's just start slowly here with the purity that is Gemini. Obviously, the sky wants us to understand this symbol more deeply. Now, there is this feeling of information. Gemini is the symbol of information. Mercury is the planet of information. So when you have 5 planets squished into the sign, it does feel a little data dumpish. Imagine you are a journalist, a really hot journalist, right? And you're on a new scoop, and it's a Friday evening, and you have your insiders give you a large cache of secret documents from, whatever 3-letter agency. And it's explosive. It's a big story. And it's 14,000 documents or something like this. And you basically have the weekend, you and your team, to go through all these documents and write this prolific article so that it can hit the press Monday morning. Imagine it's like, oh, there's not enough time. It's like information, data dump, the sense of I can't take my eyes off the road. You're gripping the steering wheel. That's the feeling of June. And when information is increased, synchronistically, what will happen for a lot of folks is, this is a rather mundane, silly example, but, the phone rings off the hook, your inbox is flooded, this sort of thing. It is a more chaotic energy because the evolutionary intention of this symbol, again, especially with Mercury in the sign, is to simply learn. Well, learn what? Well, everything is too glib of an answer, but it's a good approximation. This is the symbol of learning. I mentioned journalism. And actually, Gemini is the sign archetypally of the journalist. Now, journalism has a dark side, which we've become keenly aware about over the last years, but it also has a beautiful side to it. The curiosity of the journalist, someone who seeks to ask questions. Why? To learn. Again, the symbol of learning. Now, the new moon, fundamentally, is about new beginnings. So if you know your way around your own personal chart, you can pinpoint where these 5 planets in the sign are activating a specific house of your chart, and you can ask yourself the question, how can I learn through curiosity about whatever subject I want, whatever I'm curious about, regarding or connecting to the symbolism of that house? Now, if you don't know anything I'm talking about, that's totally cool. You can research online. I also sell a 40-minute tutorial. It's on sale. I'll put a link above. But it's very helpful to know your own charts, like, where are these planets lighting up my own chart? And then apply the journalist or the curious one to that area of your life. I forgot to mention that this new moon happens on the 6th of June, depending on what time zone you're in. If you're, in the Americas, it's going to be more early morning of the 6th. If you're in Europe, it's going to be in the early afternoon or mid-afternoon of the 6th. But, we don't want to get hung up on that day, although that is a special day. The new moon phase continues for the next 3.5 to 4 days. So really you can work with these energies as I describe it in this new moon phase. But really, since there's so many planets in Gemini, This really, you can extend this out over the next 2 weeks. Now, Gemini, if you read about Gemini online, in some article or something, usually within the first paragraph, you'll hear the word communication. It absolutely is the sign of communication. So this is a great month to practice communication and intimacy building skills with communication, because Mercury in Gemini is the most underrated love god. And here we have Venus, the goddess of love, in a very tight conjunction with this new moon. Intimacy is the basis of our understanding of Venus. So too with the moon, because the moon represents heart and soul and subjective reality. So the moon as well is a very intimate planet. So we take this concept of intimacy building skills and we tie in, Geminian energy of communication. It's a good time to practice that, but with the awareness of, and awareness and alertness are also great Gemini words, because Gemini is on the mental plane, all air signs are. Become more alert and aware of not only your communication being in the present moment as you communicate with strong intention, but then also, it's also the symbol of listening. Now, Venus, it's the relationship planet, but when Venus is healthy, their relationships built on equality and interdependency as opposed to codependency, which would be the darker side of Venus. So how can I practice intimacy building skills with communication that's coming and going, built on equality? Like I have the ability to communicate, but I also have the ability to listen. Venus is also known as the goddess of serenity and balance and harmony. So how can I create more balance with my communication? This is a strong evolutionary intention for this month. Now, since it's in a square to Saturn in Pisces, we also have Neptune in Pisces. So Neptune is quite strong in the sign because it rules it. So a lot of Piscean energy in the sky right now, activating this new moon. And Neptune and Pisces, what they have in common is they do connect to, spirituality, energy, metaphysics, consciousness, things like this. So developing more awareness about the energy exchange through what's called the ritual of conversation. I remember I was going to a workshop many years ago that my teacher was giving, and he was talking about these set of symbols. And he started talking about John Lennon, how John Lennon wrote a beautiful song about his mom called Julia. And he opened with a beautiful Geminian line. He said, "Half of what I say is meaningless, but I say it just to reach you, Julia." Oh, I love that line because it speaks to the intimacy of the exchange, regardless of the content of, what it is you're expressing. Let's say there's a psychic who's very sensitive to visual stimulus, watching two people in conversation. Even if that conversation was utterly empty of any meaningful content, that psychic would see tendrils of energy coming together as one energy body connects with the other energy body through the ritual of speech and conversation. Half of what I say is meaningless, but I just say it just to reach you. This is a beautiful way to connect with this Moon-Venus conjunction, which is very, very intimate, and also practicing the expression of one's emotion without expectation of outcome. It's like, let's create more balance and harmony through conversation, sharing our feelings without the egoic triggering. Instead, with this open-ended mind of the Geminian framework. And yes, it is the symbol of communication. Underlying communication is thought. It's appropriate this month to develop more awareness about your habitual thought structures of your mind, but that's a whole nother subject I don't really want to get sucked up into right now. Underlying thought is perception. So Gemini, at its absolute core, yes, it's the symbol of communication, but at its core, it is the symbol of perception. So a good evolutionary question to ask yourself this month is, how can I perceive reality through a clear lens? Another question could be, am I getting fixated on a specific truth? Because it's important to take accountability in areas of our life that we might be getting a little stuck in the mud, a little bit fixated on our ideas. because Gemini is a malleable sign. It likes to adapt. It likes to evolve. It's like, let's go with the flow. Let's move around. Let's not be rigid in our thoughts, right? So am I fixated on a specific truth? Here's another great Gemini question. Am I wrong about this? Could my opinion about this perhaps be a little bit more subjective than objective? And to explore these questions with an open mind, because that's the evolutionary task of having Gemini in the air right now. And if you have it in your own personal chart, that was a soul intention for you in this lifetime, is to develop an open mind. Whatever I see, it's more than that. I'm open to being stretched. I'm open to have the rug pulled out from underneath me from time to time as far as my understanding goes. As mentioned, we do have this tight square with Saturn in Pisces. Squares is a more challenging aspect. It's a little trickier to navigate. And I've said this on many videos. I'll just say it real quickly here. One of the challenges for humanity now with Saturn in Pisces is the confusion between what is real, Saturn, and what is more illusory, Pisces. A classic example of this would be all the AI-generated content these days. Is this real? Is this AI? It's like, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. And as time goes by, that will continue to be a challenge for us. But it was really started to be presented to us when Saturn entered the sign last year. So Gemini wants to create more clarity about reality through asking curious questions about potential illusory states of consciousness. This is the Gemini energy squaring the Saturn in Pisces. We really need to tie in this Mars-Pluto square. Mars is known as the god of war. And here it is in a tension-based aspect, the square to Pluto, archetypally known as the god of hell. So these planets are very different from each other. But I said before, what they have in common is intensity. This is a very intense event. And it's also generally dreaded by astrologers and described in a negative light. And there's good reasons for that, because we see negatives a lot with this event. Here's some examples. Violence and aggression. The intense energy of the Mars square Pluto can lead to heightened aggression, conflicts, even violence. And as we all know, we got wars going on and people are dying. And I would imagine those wars, maybe other things bubbling up, are going to get more intense during this time, because Mars square Pluto tends to manifest geopolitical tensions, protests turning violent, or conflicts between different social groups. And we've been seeing that a lot, obviously. I would imagine that's going to get even more intensified during this time. Another way this is going to manifest, especially as we tie it into Gemini, is Pluto represents secrecy. It represents the dark underbelly of the world. It represents the temptations of power. And when we tie that into Jupiter, we can see those in power aggressively trying to control the perception, of the public through fear by muddying the water. Saturn in Pisces square the new moon as well, the confusion between what is real and not real. And these power structures of the world trying to control the masses, the collective, through fear, because when people are afraid, their perception is easily manipulated, And we tie in Venus, which is the lesser benefic, the god of love. It's a innately relationship planet, but it too has a dark side, and that's manipulation. Just think of the unscrupulous car salesman who's really good at communication, getting you to buy something you might not normally buy. So this is a way, this month is going to be key for this. So it's going to manifest in this negative way, developing more alertness, Gemini, curiosity, open-mindedness, and saying, maybe what I'm being fed here isn't the truth, and just ask questions with an open mind and be open to new and fresh ideas, and be aware that, especially during an election year where half the world almost is going through important elections, those who are in power tend to want to stay in power and will use any method possible to manipulate that so they remain. So just be aware of that. I think that's going to be a key theme this month. Another way Mars and Pluto can interact on the shadow side of things, I did mention the powerful. Mars is about war and conflict and asserting oneself. A war between the powerful. We have different bastions of power going head to head. And, this can be in politics, it can be in corporations, it can be in social movements. But this aspect here tends to exacerbate and can create imbalances and lead to rather ruthless behavior. I just read an article on Yahoo News that Mexico just elected the first female president, and that sounds great. But then in the article, they talked about how many candidates were assassinated. They mentioned 37 people were assassinated. Another person said 20, so it's kind of hard to know who to believe. But wow, that is the dark side of Mars-Pluto. I mean, that is horrific. That is intense. And then I asked the Geminian journalist question, or at least think to myself, well, did she have to make any concessions so that she basically didn't die so she can enter into power? I mean, who knows? What do I know about it? But it is a little weird. And that's a very gnarly expression of the Mars-Pluto. So just be aware of this and social unrest and things like this. I don't want to be a doom and gloomer. I'm actually a very positive person. I have a lot of hope for humanity, but I don't want to shy away from the dark side of this to help develop more Geminian awareness for people who watch this video about what they might expect this month. But again, every front has a back. Even these two big baddies interacting with each other in the sky has a beautiful positive expression. Okay, it's a little harder to navigate through the square, but absolutely possible and potentially transformational. And some positive outcomes for the collective would be empowerment movements, breakthrough innovations, especially on the technology side with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, the symbol of technology. We also see possibilities of societies renewing or rebuilding after a crisis. But overall, we just see on the positive side a deepened sense of awakening or awareness of the dark, especially when we integrate it with the alertness and curiosity of Gemini. With evolutionary astrology, I'm very interested in how can we take these energies and work with them on a personal level for our own betterment and evolution. And I already mentioned some of those evolutionary questions when we were talking about Gemini, but now we have the Mars-Pluto. The positive expression of this on a personal level is potentially incredible levels of inner strength, determination, and transformation from our anger and our own pride if we can practice self-reflection with the Geminian open mind and ask ourselves those tough questions. Am I being a little bit dogmatic here? Am I being is there more emotionality injected into my thoughts about whatever the subject is? Am I being subjective? Am I being objective? Again, pure Gemini is objective. It's on the mental plane. It thinks clearly. And that's the core evolutionary intention here. Now, many of you know, I'll just repeat it here. A couple months ago, I created a new YouTube channel called Meditation Nexus. I just custom designed a meditation for this very event to work with on a personal level, ideally once a day for at least a couple weeks. This meditation, which I call clear perception, since that is the core of Gemini. And I'll put a link above and below if you're interested and you like meditation. I highly recommend that. And beyond that, look, all this Gemini energy on the surface is light and playful, and a lot of people will experience that. But there's no denying it. 2024, said it at the beginning of the year, is going to be the year of chaos. And Gemini can bring about that chaos, that kind of gripping the steering wheel. I'm in heavy traffic. I need to get off at my exit. I'm in a rush. That it's the symbol of the constant, immediate, and the emergent. But if you can ride that wild wave and recognize what's going on in the air right now and how that's synchronistically, archetypally, and energetically influencing the collective and us on a personal level, you can reach profound levels of evolution during this month. And these are the core evolutionary intentions, with the goal being to expand our consciousness. Thanks for joining me on this video. I wish you a blessed new moon phase. Take care.